The halls of the United Stellar Academy buzzed with noise as students from countless alien species hurried to their classes. Ethan walked quietly, head down, clutching his datapad close to his chest. He wasn't in a rush. No one waited for him. No one cared if he was late. The Academy was a place where the best and brightest from all across the galaxy trained to become leaders, explorers, and scientists. It was a place of excellence, but not for Ethan. As the only human in his class, and one of the very few humans at the entire Academy, Ethan often felt like a bug under a magnifying glass. He's so slow, like a broken drone. One student snickered as Ethan walked past. The voice belonged to Xylar, a tall insectoid alien from the Tarvex race. With his glowing blue eyes and sharp mandibles, Xylar was one of the most popular students in the Academy. Unfortunately, he had also made it his mission to make Ethan's life miserable. "What's the matter, human? Too scared to use your tiny brain today?" Xylar jeered, his group of friends laughing behind him. Ethan ignored the comment. It wasn't worth replying to. He had learned early on that standing up for himself only made things worse. The more he fought back, the harder they pushed. "Don't waste your energy," Ethan muttered to himself as he entered his first class of the day. The classroom was filled with students of every shape, color, and size. Some were scaled and lizard-like. Others had smooth metallic skin. Ethan stood out with his plain, human appearance. Brown hair, pale skin, and a small, wiry frame. He slid into his usual seat in the back corner, far away from anyone else. Today's lesson was on starship engineering, something Ethan found fascinating. While the instructor, a stern-looking alien with 3 eyes, began explaining the basics of warp drive mechanics, Ethan leaned forward, eager to take notes. He didn't care what Xylar or the others thought of him when it came to this. He loved learning, and he was good at it. But the peace didn't last long. Halfway through the lecture, a soft buzzing sound filled the air. Ethan froze. He knew that sound all too well. He glanced down and saw a small drone hovering near his desk. It was the size of a fist, sleek and shiny, and it was projecting a hologram above his head. The hologram showed a cartoon version of Ethan, short, clumsy, and holding a sign that said "Primitive Species." The class erupted in laughter. "Really, Xylar?" the instructor said, giving the Tarvex a stern look. "What? It wasn't me," Xylar said, smirking. The drone zipped around Ethan's head, flashing bright lights and playing a high-pitched, mocking tune. Ethan gritted his teeth, trying to ignore it. He focused on his notes, forcing his hands to stay steady. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him upset. Finally, the instructor waved a hand, and the drone powered down. "Enough. Let's continue." The laughter died down, but Ethan could still feel the stares. He wanted to disappear, to vanish into thin air. At lunch, Ethan sat alone at a small table in a corner of the Academy's massive cafeteria. He stared at the nutrient cube on his tray, poking it with a fork. It wobbled like jelly. He wasn't hungry. Across the room, Xylar and his group were laughing loudly, enjoying a feast of exotic foods. Ethan wondered what it was like to be part of their world, to belong. But deep down, he knew he didn't want to be like them. He didn't want to laugh at others' pain or use power to tear people down. "Hey, human," a voice called out. Ethan looked up to see a smaller alien, covered in green fur, standing near his table. It was one of Xylar's lackeys. The alien threw a small piece of fruit at Ethan, hitting him squarely on the shoulder. "Oops," the alien said, snickering. Ethan clenched his fists but said nothing. He had promised himself he wouldn't react. They thrived on his anger. As the alien walked away, Ethan sighed and glanced out the massive window beside him. From here, he could see the vast mining fields of Vorinth, stretching for miles under the pale green sky. It was a harsh planet, full of danger and opportunity. "Someday," Ethan whispered, "they'll see what humans are really made of." For now, though, he had to survive another day. Another class. Another round of insults and jeers. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change. And when it did, the galaxy would never look at him, or humans, the same way again. The United Stellar Academy training arena was one of the largest in the galaxy, designed to simulate every possible environment, from icy tundras to zero-gravity combat zones. Today, the first-year students were gathered for a zero-gravity exercise. Ethan stood near the back of the group, tightening his helmet and adjusting the straps of his suit. "Listen up," Instructor Vonner's booming voice echoed across the arena. The Krech, with his leathery green skin and 4 arms, was an intimidating figure. He paced in front of the students, his glowing yellow eyes scanning them like a predator sizing up prey. "This is not a game," Vonner growled. "In real life, zero-gravity combat can mean the difference between survival and annihilation. Today, you will face a simple challenge. Retrieve the beacon and bring it back to your team. No flying. No weapons, just strategy and teamwork." The students murmured excitedly. The arena lights dimmed, and a holographic beacon materialized in the center of the zero-gravity zone. It glowed faintly, spinning slowly. Ethan tightened his grip on the handhold beside him. This was one of the few activities he didn't dread. Unlike most of the Academy's challenges, zero-gravity tests didn't rely on brute strength or size. They required agility, focus, and quick thinking, things Ethan was surprisingly good at. As the students entered the simulation zone in groups, Ethan watched from the sidelines. Sylar's team was up first. The Tarvex strutted into the arena like he already owned it, his 6 glowing eyes scanning the beacon. "Watch and learn, human," Sylar sneered as he passed Ethan. The simulation began, and Sylar's team quickly floated toward the beacon. But instead of working together, Sylar took charge, barking orders and shoving teammates aside. His brute force helped him reach the beacon first, but he struggled to bring it back while the others flailed in zero gravity. The result was chaos. By the time their timer ran out, Sylar's team had failed to retrieve the beacon. The Tarvex stormed out of the arena, muttering about useless teammates. "Next group," Vonner called. Finally, it was Ethan's turn. His heart raced as he stepped into the zero-gravity zone with his teammates, a shy bird-like alien named Rilk and a bulky, quiet creature called Threx. "Just stick together," Ethan said softly as the timer started. The instant they pushed off the starting platform, Ethan's mind sharpened. In zero gravity, movement was tricky. A single wrong push could send you spinning out of control. He remembered the diagrams he had studied in his spare time, mapping out the best ways to navigate such environments. "Threx, grab that handhold and anchor us," Ethan instructed. The large alien nodded and planted himself firmly near the edge of the zone. "Rilk, you're the fastest. Push toward the beacon, but keep one foot braced. I'll follow and stabilize you." For a moment, Rilk hesitated, her feathered wings twitching nervously. But something in Ethan's calm tone gave her confidence, and she did as he said. The 3 of them moved like a well-oiled machine. Ethan calculated every angle and movement, using the momentum of their pushes to close the distance to the beacon. When they reached it, Ethan grabbed hold and signaled for Threx to pull them back. The simulation ended with a loud beep. Their time was the fastest of the day. The arena erupted in murmurs. No one had expected Ethan, the weak, bullied human, to lead a successful team. As they stepped out of the zone, Instructor Vonner approached them. He crossed his 4 arms and stared at Ethan for a long moment. "Interesting," Vonner muttered. "You're not as useless as you look, human." Ethan wasn't sure if it was a compliment, but he nodded anyway. From across the room, Sylar glared at him, his mandibles clicking in frustration. For the first time, the Tarvex seemed rattled. Later that evening, Ethan sat alone in his small dorm room, staring out the window at the green skies of Forinth. He replayed the day's events in his mind. For once, he hadn't been the outcast. For a brief moment, he had felt like he belonged. But he knew this wouldn't last. Xylar wouldn't let it. The Tarvex was too proud to let a human upstage him. Ethan sighed and leaned back in his chair. "One good day," he whispered. "That's all I get. Tomorrow, they'll just find another way to make me feel small." What Ethan didn't realize was that his performance in the arena had caught more than just Vonner's attention. Far away, aboard a massive starship orbiting Vorinth, a figure watched the day's recordings on a holographic screen. Her face was obscured by shadows, but her eyes gleamed with pride. "He's ready," the woman said softly. Ethan's routine didn't change much after his surprising success in the zero-gravity simulation. Most of his classmates still ignored him, and Xylar's hostility only grew stronger. But there were small changes. Rilk, the bird-like alien, now smiled at him in the halls, and Threx gave him a quiet nod whenever they crossed paths. Ethan wasn't used to kindness, but he appreciated it. One morning, the Academy announced a field trip to the Vorinth Prime Energy Core. The core was a massive structure that powered the planet's mining operations and provided energy to nearby star systems. It was a symbol of Vorinth's importance in the galaxy. "Stay close to your groups," Instructor Vonner warned as the students disembarked from the transport shuttles and entered the facility. "This place is dangerous. Any reckless behavior could get you killed." Ethan followed his group through the towering halls of the energy core. The structure hummed with power, its walls lined with glowing conduits carrying energy to every corner of the planet. The air felt heavy, almost electric. As they walked, Xylar and his gang whispered and snickered behind Ethan. He ignored them, keeping his focus on the guide, a tall, robotic alien explaining how the core's fusion reactors worked. Suddenly, an alarm blared. The guide froze mid-sentence, his metallic body stiffening. "Warning," he said in a monotone voice. "Unstable energy surge detected in Reactor 3. Evacuation protocols initiated." The students exchanged nervous glances. "What does that mean?" Rilk whispered. "It means run," Threx rumbled. Before anyone could react, a violent tremor shook the entire facility. The lights flickered, and a deafening roar echoed through the halls. A burst of energy shot out from the reactor room ahead, sending shockwaves through the corridors. Panic erupted. Students screamed and scattered in all directions. The instructors tried to maintain order, but the chaos was overwhelming. Ethan clutched a nearby railing, his heart racing. His first instinct was to run, but he quickly noticed something others hadn't. The main exit was blocked by a collapsing energy conduit, its crackling sparks making it impossible to pass. "We're trapped," someone shouted. Ethan's mind worked fast. He had spent hours studying the facility's layout before the trip. He knew there was an emergency maintenance tunnel nearby, a route that bypassed the main exit and led directly to the surface. "This way," Ethan yelled, his voice cutting through the chaos. At first, no one listened, but Rilk and Threx, recognizing his calm determination, followed him. A few others joined, desperate for any chance of escape. Ethan led them down a side corridor, dodging falling debris and avoiding the unstable energy surges. He found the maintenance hatch and pulled it open. "Go, get inside," he shouted, helping the others climb into the narrow tunnel. As the last of the group entered, Ethan turned back and saw Xylar lying on the ground, pinned under a fallen beam. The Tarvex's mandibles clicked weakly as he struggled to free himself. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. Xylar had done nothing but make his life miserable. Leaving him behind would be easy. But Ethan wasn't like Xylar. He sprinted toward the Tarvex, ignoring the sparks and the heat radiating from the damaged reactor. "Hold still," Ethan said, grabbing the beam and using all his strength to lift it just enough for Xylar to crawl out. Xylar stared at him in disbelief. "Why? Why did you?" "Move," Ethan interrupted, pulling Xylar toward the maintenance hatch. The two of them climbed into the tunnel just as another explosion rocked the facility, sealing off the corridor behind them. The group emerged from the tunnel into the bright green skies of Vorinth. Rescue ships were already landing nearby, their crews rushing to help the evacuated students. Ethan collapsed onto the ground, breathing heavily. His hands were scraped, and his legs felt like jelly, but he was alive. Rilke and Threx helped him up, their faces filled with gratitude. "You saved us," Rilke said softly. Before Ethan could respond, Siler stumbled forward, his mandibles twitching awkwardly. I don't understand," he said. "Why didn't you leave me?" Ethan shrugged. "Because I'm not like you." Siler said nothing, but the look in his eyes had changed. Later that evening, as Ethan sat alone in his dorm room, he couldn't stop thinking about the incident. He had acted on instinct, but his actions had saved lives. Far above the planet, aboard the gilded starship of the Galactic Empress, a holographic recording of the day's events played on a massive screen. The woman watching leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "It seems the boy has more potential than I expected," she said. "It's time to reveal the truth." The next morning, Ethan woke up to an unusual silence in the academy halls. Normally, the corridors were filled with chatter, laughter, and the occasional sound of Siler's mocking voice. Today, however, the atmosphere was different. As Ethan made his way to the training wing, he noticed groups of students whispering and glancing at him. He overheard snippets of their conversations. "Did you hear? The humans saved Thytalar. They say he carried half his group to safety. Maybe humans aren't as weak as we thought." Ethan tried to ignore the stares, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. He had spent years being invisible, or worse, a target. And now, suddenly, people were noticing him. In the main training hall, Instructor Vonner was waiting for the students. Beside him stood a tall woman, cloaked in deep crimson robes, her face partially obscured by a shimmering veil. Her presence was commanding, almost regal. The room fell silent as the students filed in. Ethan felt a strange pull toward the woman. There was something familiar about her, though he couldn't place it. "Students," Vonner began, "we are honored to welcome a special guest today. This is Ambassador Elira, representative of the Galactic Empress herself." A ripple of excitement spread through the crowd. The Galactic Empress was a mysterious figure, rarely seen but known to be the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. Her ambassadors were said to act with her full authority. Elira stepped forward, her voice calm yet firm. "The Empress has been observing your progress. She values the next generation of leaders, thinkers, and warriors. But she also values courage, true courage, which often comes from the least expected places." Her gaze swept over the crowd before landing on Ethan. "Ethan, step forward." Ethan froze. Every eye in the room turned to him. For a moment, he considered pretending she had made a mistake, but the intensity of her gaze left no doubt. Slowly, he stepped out of the crowd. Elira's calling him. Thylar whispered to one of his friends, his mandibles clicking nervously. Ethan stood in front of the ambassador, feeling the weight of the moment. "You showed great bravery during the reactor incident," Elira said. "But bravery alone isn't enough. True strength lies in what you do with that courage. Are you ready to discover what you're truly capable of?" Ethan blinked, unsure how to respond. I guess so." Elira smiled faintly. "Follow me." Ethan followed Elira through the winding halls of the academy, his mind racing with questions. Why had she singled him out? What did she mean by true strength? They finally stopped in front of a sleek, silver door. It slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a private docking bay. Inside, a small, elegant starship waited, its surface gleaming like liquid metal. Ethan hesitated. "Where are we going?" he asked. "To meet someone who has been waiting a long time to see you," Elira replied. Before he could ask more, she gestured for him to board the ship. Ethan's curiosity outweighed his nerves, and he stepped inside. The journey was short but surreal. The starship moved with a grace Ethan had never experienced before, its engines so quiet he could barely feel them. Elira said little during the trip, leaving Ethan to his thoughts. When the ship docked, the doors opened to reveal a grand chamber bathed in golden light. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings of stars, planets, and ancient battles. At the far end of the room stood a throne, its occupant cloaked in shadow. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The figure rose and stepped into the light, revealing a tall woman with sharp features and piercing silver eyes. Her presence was overwhelming, radiating power and authority. "Elira," she said, her voice like a melody, "you've done well." Elira bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, I present Ethan as you commanded." The woman, no, the Empress, turned her gaze to Ethan. For a moment, he felt completely exposed, as if she could see every thought and feeling he had ever had. "Ethan," she said softly, "do you know who I am?" Ethan swallowed hard. "You're the Galactic Empress." She smiled, a mix of warmth and mystery. "That's one title, yes. But to you, I am something more. I am your mother." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "What? That's not possible." "It is," she said gently. "I had to hide the truth to protect you. But now, the galaxy is changing, and so must you. It's time for you to take your place, not just as my son, but as a leader. The galaxy needs you." Ethan's mind spun. He had always felt like an outcast, a nobody. And now he was being told he was the son of the most powerful being in the galaxy. I don't understand," he stammered. "You will," the Empress said. "But first, you must prove yourself. The challenges ahead will not be easy, but you have already shown your strength. Trust in that." As Ethan stood there, his world forever changed. He realized one thing. His life would never be the same. Ethan sat in the golden chamber, the weight of the Empress's words still sinking in. "I'm your son," he repeated softly, his voice filled with disbelief. The Empress nodded. "Yes, but I did not reveal this to you lightly. You grew up on Earth, far from the politics and dangers of the Empire, because I wanted you to have a life untouched by my enemies. But now, the galaxy faces a growing threat, and you, Ethan, must rise to meet it." Ethan's thoughts swirled in confusion. He wasn't a warrior, a leader, or anything remotely special. He was just a human, a species constantly looked down upon by other races. "Why me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Empress's silver eyes softened. "Because you have a strength that others underestimate. You've proven it already, in the way you led your team to safety, the way you risked yourself for someone who treated you with cruelty. That kind of courage cannot be taught. It is born." Ethan's heart pounded, but before he could respond, the Empress raised a hand. "But talk is not enough. You must prove you are ready." She gestured toward a set of towering golden doors at the far end of the chamber. "Beyond those doors lies your test. If you succeed, you will take your place as my heir. If you fail—" She paused, her expression unreadable. "Then perhaps I was wrong about you." Ethan hesitated. The idea of a test didn't scare him as much as the possibility of failing. What if he wasn't ready? What if he proved her wrong? Elira stepped forward, her crimson robes sweeping the floor. "This isn't just about your strength, Ethan. It's about your heart, your mind, and your ability to face the unknown. Remember, the Empress chose you for a reason." Taking a deep breath, Ethan nodded. "I'll do it." The Empress smiled faintly and waved her hand. The golden doors creaked open, revealing a dark corridor bathed in faint blue light. Ethan stepped forward, his chest tight with anticipation. The corridor led to a vast chamber, circular in shape, with walls that shimmered like liquid metal. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, atop which sat a glowing sphere of pure energy. A calm, mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "Welcome, Ethan. Your test begins now. Retrieve the sphere of unity and return it to the pedestal. You will face 3 trials. Only the worthy may succeed." Ethan's palms grew sweaty. He stepped closer to the pedestal, And as soon as he did, the chamber shifted. The floor beneath him turned into a mirrored surface, reflecting an endless void. Suddenly, the voice spoke again. Trial 1. Confront your fear. Before Ethan could react, the mirrors around him began to ripple. Shadows emerged from the reflections, forming into creatures of various shapes and sizes. Some were familiar, like Siler's menacing figure, but others were grotesque, with fanged mouths and glowing red eyes. They surrounded him, their whispers filling the air. You're weak. You don't belong here. Turn back before it's too late. Ethan clenched his fists. The voices struck a nerve, echoing the taunts he had endured for years. But deep down, he knew the truth. These shadows weren't real. They were manifestations of his self-doubt. I'm not weak, he said aloud, his voice steady. I'm not turning back. The shadows lunged at him, but Ethan didn't flinch. As they touched him, they dissolved into harmless wisps of smoke. The chamber brightened, and the mechanical voice spoke again. Trial 1 complete. The floor shifted once more, and Ethan found himself standing in a new room. This one was filled with towering walls that constantly moved and reshaped themselves, forming an elaborate maze. Trial 2. Find the path, the voice said. Ethan scanned the room, his mind racing. The walls moved so quickly that any wrong step could trap him. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. He noticed faint patterns on the walls, lines and symbols that seemed to form a map. Trusting his instincts, Ethan began moving through the maze, focusing on the symbols to guide his path. The walls shifted around him, but he stayed calm, dodging obstacles and following the patterns. After what felt like hours, he reached the other side. A door slid open, and the voice announced, Trial 2 complete. The final chamber was empty, except for the glowing sphere of unity floating in the center. Ethan approached it cautiously, but as soon as he reached out, the ground trembled. A massive creature emerged, made entirely of light and energy. Its eyes burned like twin suns, and its voice boomed. Trial 3. Prove your worth. The creature lunged at Ethan, its form shifting between solid and light. Ethan dodged, his heart pounding. He realized that fighting it directly was impossible. Instead, he focused on the patterns of its movements, looking for an opening. Finally, he saw it, a brief moment when the creature's form solidified. With all his strength, Ethan leaped toward the sphere and grabbed it. The moment he did, the creature froze, then shattered into 1,000 shards of light. The voice spoke one last time. Trial 3 complete. You have proven your worth. Ethan returned to the Empress's chamber, the sphere of unity glowing in its hands. She rose from her throne, her eyes shining with pride. You are ready, Ethan, she said. This is only the beginning. Ethan stood taller, his doubts fading. For the first time, he felt like he belonged, not just in the academy, but in the galaxy. Ethan sat on the steps of the Empress's throne room, the glow of the sphere of unity still faintly pulsing in his hands. He couldn't stop staring at it, his mind racing with everything he had just been through. The trials had tested his courage, his intelligence, and his ability to adapt. But what lay ahead felt far more daunting. The Empress stepped down from her throne, her crimson robes trailing behind her. She knelt before him, her piercing silver eyes meeting his. You have done well, Ethan. Few have passed the trials of the sphere. You have proven that you are more than just my son. You are a leader in your own right. Ethan's cheeks burned. But I didn't do anything special. I just kept going. And that, the Empress said with a faint smile, is what makes you special. You didn't give in to fear or despair. The galaxy will soon learn what I already know, that even the smallest spark can ignite a great flame. She stood, raising her voice so that it echoed across the grand chamber. The time has come to reveal the truth to the galaxy. Ethan, my son, will no longer remain hidden. His enemies will know his name, and his allies will rally to his side. Ethan's stomach tightened. Wait, what do you mean by enemies? I don't even know who I'm supposed to fight." The Empress turned, her expression growing serious. "The galaxy is not as peaceful as it seems. Shadows stir in the outer systems. A coalition of warlords, pirates, and rogue AI factions is rising, united by a single leader, an entity known only as the Null Sovereign." Ethan frowned. "Why haven't I heard about this?" "Because their movements have been subtle, their plans shrouded in secrecy. But now, their forces grow bold. They've already begun attacking outposts near the edges of the Empire. Their ultimate goal is to overthrow the throne and plunge the galaxy into chaos." Ethan swallowed hard. "And you think I can stop them?" "I know you can," the Empress replied. "But you won't do it alone." She clapped her hands, and the massive golden doors at the end of the chamber swung open. Ethan turned to see a group of figures entering. At the front was Threx, his reptilian frame towering over the others. His deep, gravelly voice boomed across the room. "So it's true. The human is the heir to the throne." Behind him was Rilke, her bird-like feathers glinting in the light. She chirped with excitement. "I knew there was something special about you, Ethan. You saved us all, and now you're the son of the Empress. Incredible." Xylar followed reluctantly, his mandibles clicking nervously. He avoided Ethan's gaze, but he muttered, "Guess I owed you an apology for everything." Ethan stared at them, stunned. "What are you all doing here?" "They're here because you'll need them," the Empress said. "A leader is only as strong as the people who stand with them. These cadets have already fought beside you, and they've proven their loyalty." Threx stepped forward, his sharp teeth glinting as he grinned. "We're your team now, Ethan. Wherever you go, we go." Ethan's heart swelled. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't alone. The Empress led the group to a towering viewport overlooking the capital city of the Empire. Below them, millions of lights sparkled across the sprawling metropolis, a testament to the unity of countless species working together. But beyond the city, in the endless expanse of space, danger loomed. "The Null Sovereign's forces are massing in the Kelverus sector," the Empress said. "If they seize the sector, they'll control the hyperspace lanes and cut off half the galaxy. Your first mission, Ethan, will be to stop them." Ethan's breath hitched. "My first mission? I don't even know how to lead a team, let alone stop an army." The Empress placed a hand on his shoulder. "Leadership isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about trusting yourself and those around you. You've already proven you can lead in the face of danger. Now it's time to do it again." She gestured to the others. "Threx will be your strategist. Rilke, your scout. Xylar, your tech specialist. Together, you'll infiltrate the Null Sovereign's forward base, gather intelligence, and disrupt their operations." Ethan looked at his friends. Threx nodded confidently. Rilke gave him a thumbs up with her feathered hand. Even Xylar, despite his usual arrogance, seemed determined. Ethan took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, we'll do it." The next day, the team boarded a sleek starship named Eclipse's Flame. It was smaller than the Empress's royal ships, but built for speed and stealth. Ethan felt a thrill of excitement as he stepped into the cockpit, taking the pilot's seat. As the ship powered up, a holographic image of Illyra appeared on the console. "Your mission parameters have been uploaded," she said. "You'll be operating under complete stealth. No backup, no reinforcements. The galaxy must not know about this mission yet." "Got it," Ethan said, his voice steady. The ship lifted off, and within moments, they were soaring through hyperspace. In the vast emptiness of space, far from the safety of the capital, the Null Sovereign's forces waited. They had no idea what was coming. Ethan leaned back in his seat, his heart pounding. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had a purpose, a chance to prove that humanity was more than what others thought. "Team," he said, glancing at the others, "we've got a galaxy to save." Threx grinned. "Let's make some noise." As the stars streaked past them, the ship plunged deeper into the unknown, where their greatest challenge awaited. The Eclipse's flame dropped out of hyperspace near the Kelvarus sector. The sight was overwhelming. Massive warships surrounded a giant space station, its surface bristling with weaponry. The Null Sovereign's forces had turned the once bustling trade hub into a fortress. Ethan stood in the cockpit, staring at the enemy fleet. His pulse quickened. "That's a lot of ships," he said nervously. "Understatement of the year," Siler muttered, his fingers flying over the controls of the ship's scanner. "Their defensive grid is tight. If we get spotted, we'll be space dust in seconds." Rilke leaned forward, her keen bird-like eyes scanning the layout. "There's a weak point in their patrol pattern here," she said, pointing to a narrow gap between two cruisers. "If we time it right, we can slip through undetected." Threx growled in approval. "Once we're inside the station, we'll disable their command center and destroy the data core. Without their coordination, their fleet will fall into chaos." Ethan nodded, trying to steady his nerves. "Let's do it." The Eclipse's flame glided through the gap in the patrols, its cloaking systems humming softly. Ethan gripped the controls tightly, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Every second felt like an eternity. "Easy, easy," Rilke whispered, her claws tapping anxiously on the console. As they approached the station's docking bay, Siler deactivated the cloaking system. The ship's appearance shimmered, and a false identification signal pinged the station's sensors. "Let's hope they buy this," Siler said, his voice tense. A moment later, a robotic voice crackled over the comms. "Docking clearance granted. Proceed to Bay 12." Ethan let out a shaky breath. "We're in." The team disembarked from the ship, blending in with the workers and droids bustling around the station. The air was tense, filled with the hum of machinery and the distant clatter of boots on metal floors. Threx led the way, his imposing figure making it easy to clear a path. Rilke darted ahead, her sharp eyes spotting surveillance cameras and guiding the group through blind spots. Tylar muttered under his breath as he hacked into a nearby terminal, disabling security checkpoints as they moved deeper into the station. Finally, they'd reached the command center, a massive room filled with holographic displays and rows of consoles. A squad of heavily armed guards stood at attention, their focus on the data streams flowing across the screens. "We need a distraction," Rilke whispered. Ethan's heart pounded. "I'll handle it," he said, surprising even himself. Before anyone could protest, he stepped into the room. The guards turned, their weapons raised. "Hey," Ethan shouted, raising his hands. "I'm lost. My supervisor said to deliver these parts here, but I think I took a wrong turn." He held up a small tool he had grabbed from the docking bay. The guards stared at him, clearly suspicious. One of them stepped forward, his voice gruff. "You're not authorized to be here." Ethan forced a nervous laugh. "Oh, that's probably true. I knew, you see, and the station layout is super confusing." Before the guard could respond, there was a flash of movement behind him. Threx lunged from the shadows, knocking the guard out with a single punch. The rest of the team sprang into action. Rilke used her agility to disarm another guard, while Siler sent a pulse through the room's electronics, temporarily disabling their weapons. Within moments, the guards were subdued. "Nice work," Threx said, clapping Ethan on the back. Ethan grinned shakily. "I think I just sweated through my shirt." Siler quickly plugged into the central console, his mandibles clicking in concentration. "I've located the data core. It's heavily encrypted, but I'm slicing through it now." The station trembled suddenly, a low rumble echoing through the walls. "What was that?" Ethan asked, his voice rising. Rilke glanced at the displays. "Enemy ships are mobilizing. I think they've detected our presence." Zylar cursed. "I need more time. Keep them off me." The doors to the command center burst open, and Null Sovereign soldiers poured in. Blaster fire erupted, forcing the team to take cover. Threx roared, charging into the fray, and using his massive strength to hold back the attackers. Rilke darted between cover, her precision strikes taking down enemies with ease. Ethan fired his blaster, the recoil jolting his arm as he tried to stay calm. "We can't hold them off forever," Rilke shouted. "I'm almost there," Scylla replied, sweat dripping from his brow. Ethan glanced at the chaos around him. Despite their efforts, more soldiers were pouring in. If they didn't act fast, they'd be overwhelmed. He spotted a fuel conduit running along the ceiling, its warning lights blinking faintly. "Threx, Rilke, cover me," Ethan yelled. Before they could stop him, he sprinted across the room, dodging blaster fire. He aimed his blaster at the conduit and fired. The explosion sent a wave of fire through the room, scattering the enemy soldiers and buying Sylar the time he needed. "Got it," Zylar shouted. "Data core wiped. Let's move." The team raced back to the Eclipse's flame, alarms blaring throughout the station. Enemy ships were closing in as they launched into space, the station erupting in explosions behind them. Ethan slumped into the pilot's seat, his hands trembling as he navigated through the chaos. "We did it," Rilke said, her voice filled with relief. Threx grinned. "Not bad for a human, huh?" Ethan managed a tired smile. "We're not done yet. This was just the beginning." As the stars streaked past them in hyperspace, Ethan felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. He wasn't just the outcast human anymore. He was a leader, a fighter, and the heir to the galaxy's greatest empire. And for the first time, he believed he was ready for whatever came next.